You know,
if you wanted to clarify the decision.
First of all, remember, most of the regulation of corporations started with the Tillman Act. Go back and read why Tillman introduced that legislation to regulate corporations. This gentleman wants to, you need to give him a mic. He's been trying to ask, right here in the front row. But Tillman was from South Carolina, and as I hear the story, he was concerned that the corporations, Republican corporations, were favorable toward blacks, and he felt that there was a need to regulate them. But so we don't raise that to this plane of some sort of beatific action. But with that aside, I have taken the position that the court adopted with respect to how we associate. If 10 of you got together and decided to speak, just as a group, you'll say you had First Amendment rights to speak and the First Amendment right of association. If you all then formed a partnership to speak, you'd say we still had that First Amendment right to speak and of association. Well, what if you put yourself in a corporate form? I found it fascinating that the people who were editorializing against it were the New York Times company and the Washington Post company, who were exempted by statute. So then it becomes a statutory right, not a constitutional right. These are corporations. The Gannett Company. You see what I'm saying? What is the form that we associate and have to do with the right? But anyway, the opinions speak for themselves. I've written extensively. You go back and you write Missouri, the shrink case in Missouri, Colorado Republican Party, McCain-Feingold, the big campaign finance cases. I have dissented in, either dissented or concurred in all those cases, saying that this distinction was absurd, and saying that ultimately, and I found it interesting, the ACLU agreed, I think, with the outcome in this case, and you would not consider them conservative, you see. A corporation's a corporation. A corporation can be 10 people. It could be a subchapter S corporation. There are all sorts of ways that we decide to associate and to speak. But I'm not going to re-argue that. People have their own opinion. My job is not to argue about their opinion. It is to write opinions and decide cases. And then they can react any way they want to.
Mr. Justice, I grew up partially near your house in Savannah when I was a little boy.
Could you just
Yeah.
hold that up there?
Anyhow, my name is Michael McCain, and I'm one of the McCain boys. And I'm going to probably ask you a question my cousin would like to know. Why does the Supreme Court go back to the Feingold, McCain-Feingold bill and change part of it? I don't understand.
Well, the question had to do with the constitutionality of it, not changing it, and whether or not this has been a subject of a number of cases since McCain-Feingold was adopted. It has been challenged consistently, not only in its application, but as to its overall constitutionality. And so it was never really settled. We don't bring the cases come to us. And it was 5-4, I think, when it was first decided.
Yeah, well, I'm not a lawyer. I know my cousin would like to ask you that question.
Well, I know your cousin, and he's a nice guy. And the interesting thing is I've dissented each time thinking that the McCain-Feingold was unconstitutional. I've seen him, he never asked me about it. And I've seen him a number of times, he never.
Well, Justice Thomas,
you're not quitting, are you?
We've got time.
Well, we got all these people.
But we got plenty of time. But with respect to that, just as a general matter, how do you deal with precedent? Because I mean that's a complicated question sometimes to look back. If you're looking back to the original understanding, how do you wrestle with that in terms of if there's an intervening case that isn't consistent with original understanding? What do you do? Well,
I mean we're the court of last resort, and you've got to always remember, if we don't change it, who changes it? And I always ask people, what would you do with Plessy versus Ferguson that was 60 years old? If it's wrong, the ultimate precedent is the Constitution. And it's not what we say it is, it's what it actually says. And I think we have to be humble enough to say we were wrong. But with the McCain-Feingold, it was never really settled. And it was back and forth, as I just explained to the gentleman that it's Mr. McCain, that it was still up in the air, and people would like it to be settled, but it wasn't. It probably still isn't settled, because it's 5-4. And it is a hard deal. I mean, if it's a statutory case, we say, look, Congress can change it. But if it's a constitutional case, we're the last line. And if we got it wrong, it's wrong, and we are obligated to revisit it. But we don't do that lightly. And I think there's the majority opinion in McCain, in the last case, went to great lengths to explain why stare decisis did not apply.
Good morning, Justice.